On this Wednesday night, the long-awaited return of cross-border travel. The plan to lift restrictions at U.S. land and ferry borders to fully vaccinated Canadians.
It's been incredibly confusing for travelers who can't understand, why as a Canadian can I fly to the United States, but I can't drive.
What to consider before you hit the road.
Know where you're traveling to, where you're traveling from.
State of emergency over Iqaluit's water supply.
I feel like I live in a third world country.
Why residents in Nunavut's capital can't drink the tap water. The red tape that's left a former Afghan interpreter and his family stranded in Ukraine.
This is the only chance to save my family.
What's holding up their resettlement in Canada? Plus, transplant transport, the drone delivery in Toronto that's a world first, and Shatner's trip to space. Why the rocket trip moved the Canadian actor to tears.
Global National with Donna Friesen.
Good evening and thanks for joining us. We begin with another sign things put on hold because of the pandemic are returning to normal thanks to vaccines. The U.S. is lifting land border restrictions. It means fully vaccinated Canadians will again be allowed to enter the United States at land and ferry border crossings starting in early November. Canada has been open to fully vaccinated Americans for more than 2 months. In our top story tonight, Jackson Proskow looks at why the Biden administration took so long to reciprocate and whether it will be back to business as usual.
570 days after the doors slammed shut on non-essential travel, there's a plan to fully reopen the world's longest border to anyone who's vaccinated.
It's incredibly important because it's been incredibly confusing for travelers who can't understand, why as a Canadian can I fly to the United States, but I can't drive.
Beginning in November, the U.S. will reciprocate a decision made by Canada in August, lifting restrictions on land travel for foreigners who've had the jab. Come January, essential workers like truck drivers and nurses will also have to be vaccinated to cross. But there's still a wide gulf between the two countries over standards. Travelers arriving at the U.S. border will simply be asked if they're vaccinated. They may only have to provide proof if they're sent for secondary inspection. And unlike visitors to Canada, U.S.-bound travelers will not need a negative COVID test to cross the border.
I think it's very unfortunate that we didn't align our way out of the pandemic as we sort of aligned our way going into the border restrictions, because it is going to be more confusing for travelers.
1, 2, 3.
One big question, will the U.S. welcome Canadians who received mixed doses of vaccines? The White House says that decision is up to the CDC. The Deputy Prime Minister visiting Washington says it's a concern.
We are working to clarify and finalize all the details with our American partners.
The lack of clarity comes after months of delays. The explosive spread of the Delta variant and lagging U.S. vaccination rates derailed plans for a summer reopening. The free flow of trade and air travel also dampened the urgency.
I think that this border should have been opened 5 months ago because the same criteria applies today as it did then. If you're vaccinated, you have strong immunity from giving or getting COVID.
Ultimately, the fate of Canadian travelers at the land border is being tied to U.S. policies for visitors from every single country on Earth. That November day when the border reopens will be the same day that a new U.S. mandatory vaccination policy goes into effect for all travelers arriving in this country by air.
I'm Sean O'Shea, Niagara Falls, Ontario. Border communities have been waiting for this for more than a year and a half. Those used to traveling back and forth between the two countries say it's about time. In this Canadian city known for attracting tourists from around the world, the mostly closed border with the United States has hit the community hard.
Niagara Falls, New York, and Niagara Falls, Canada, one big city. So I've got family on both sides, friends on both sides. We go shopping back and forth. It's a real symbiotic relationship.
With Canadians soon allowed to drive to the United States again for non-essential travel, many are hoping for a return to normal.
It's a great idea. I have friends there that I want to visit, so it's a great idea.
Joanne Arpino is a Canadian living in Michigan. She had her first child during the pandemic.
And it was the first grandchild in our family. It was my first baby. I had a daughter. And so my dad lives in Canada, which he actually only lives 27 minutes from my house, but across the border. And so he wasn't able to come over to see her.
In places like these, it's common for someone to live on one side of the border and work on the other. Colin McDonald lives in Windsor, works in advertising in Detroit. He hasn't been there in a year and a half.
We would still find ourselves crossing over on the weekends for sports, entertainment, restaurants, really anything new that was going on.
Land borders reopened to American travelers in August, but not the other way around. Businesses have paid a high price.
We've seen a huge drop in revenues at places like the duty-free stores along the border, but also with accommodations.
Hard on tourism, hard on relationships in places like these, a period of time that border communities would like to put in the past.
Lives have been cut off and disrupted. It's had a major impact on people.
The changes come in time for U.S. Thanksgiving, the Christmas holiday period, and winter, when tens of thousands of Canadians typically head south for warmer weather. Donna.
All right, Sean O'Shea in Niagara Falls tonight. Thank you. Canada's Public Safety Minister released a statement saying the government welcomes the news of the U.S. land border reopening, though Bill Blair urged Canadians to continue to take precautions and follow public health advice when traveling outside the country. As David Akin reports, the official guidance from Health Canada is still to avoid non-essential travel.
We still have travel advisories in place recommending that people don't travel unless it's absolutely necessary.
In other words, even though you can, maybe you shouldn't.
I think it's really important for Canadians to listen closely to the advice from PHAC, from Canadian medical authorities, and to just be careful.
And the rule change in Washington does not change a key rule set by Ottawa. All fully vaccinated travelers returning to Canada from the U.S., whether it's by plane, train, or automobile, must still have a clean PCR test before returning. One reason for that, the public health risk continues to exist, particularly for travelers to U.S. states, which still have severe COVID outbreaks and/or much lower vaccination rates than in most parts of Canada.
We need to be cautious and we need to exercise prudence in terms of traveling to places where COVID-19 is still spreading wide, quite intensely.
And some regions in Canada, especially in Alberta and Saskatchewan, have health systems already under stress because of high case counts. They do not need sick travelers.
I think that is why we sort of say that it is important to exercise quite a bit of caution. Know where you're traveling to, where you're traveling from.
Still, continuing to loosen border travel restrictions with the U.S. is seen as crucial for revitalizing business relationships and strengthening the economy on both sides of the border.
I think in any business relationship, the critical ingredient is trust, and trust is difficult to earn over a camera. You really want to be there in person, and so I think businesses in particular are going to lead that charge.
Still, business groups and health experts say there is lots of work still to do on international travel, everything from setting a vaccine passport standard to how countries recognize different vaccines. And that means there will continue to be pressure on governments in both Washington and Ottawa for even more clarity on travel rules. Donna?
All right, David Akin in Ottawa, thank you. A major water crisis is unfolding in a Canadian capital city. Iqaluit has declared a state of emergency after finding evidence of gasoline in its treated tap water. Nearly 9,000 people in the capital of Nunavut have been told not to drink or cook with water from the tap, even if it's filtered or boiled. As Neetu Garcha reports, that's left residents scrambling to find clean water.
This is what happens with no access to clean drinking water. A mother and child sourcing water from a river. With no drinkable tap water across Iqaluit, residents like Connie Naudluck are scared.
The fact that this happened here in Iqaluit, in a major city in Canada in 2021, is very disturbing.
She says for nearly 2 weeks, people here complained about the smell of fuel or oil in the water, but were told by city officials it was safe to drink until Tuesday.
Why wait so late? And people are getting sick, people are getting headaches.
The mayor says his team trusted scientific monitoring and shares the same frustration, now targeted at him.
I've been drinking the water myself. My kids have been drinking the water. Of course it's worrisome. So, I wholeheartedly understand where the public is coming from.
An investigation is underway to determine the cause.
We don't know how much is in there, what's in there, if there's anything in there. The smell is in there, of course.
Meanwhile, stores are running out of bottled water. Prices, already high, have surged.
One store actually ran out of bottled water in 2 hours.
All of Iqaluit's drinking water comes from a single source, the Lake Geraldine Reservoir, which has been fraught with supply issues partly because of reduced rainfall in recent years. In 2018, it spurred a health emergency. After that, a pump was installed to divert water from another river to Lake Geraldine. But now, with possible chemical contamination affecting the entire city's supply, residents have been gathering water to boil from a third source. The mostly Inuit city of nearly 9,000 is just the latest Indigenous community in Canada to deal with water contamination issues. And residents like Naudluck say Ottawa's lack of action sends a devastating message.
Because we're Indigenous, it doesn't really matter. There's boil water advisories all over the country in Indigenous communities for over 35 years in some places.
In a statement, the federal government said in part it's continuing to collaborate with all partners, including the city, to ensure residents have access to safe drinking water as soon as possible.
I feel like I live in a third world country. It's really sad to say. I really legit feel like I live in another country at this moment and that we're not priority.
Neetu Garcha, Global News.
Quebec is delaying the deadline for healthcare workers to be vaccinated until November 15th. The health minister says the potential departure of up to 14,000 employees is just too big a risk for the already strained system.
We want to give the unvaccinated staff extra time to collect their dose. But I want to be clear, we will apply the mandatory vaccination for healthcare workers, but postponing the 30-day deadline is the best solution under the circumstances.
Starting next Monday, all unvaccinated employees in the public health sector in Quebec will have to be tested at least 3 times a week before their shift. All new hires in the public system will also have to be vaccinated. Quebec had imposed a Friday deadline for all healthcare workers to be vaccinated or face suspension without pay. Several Ontario hospitals are making vaccinations mandatory for visitors, not just staff. Starting October 22nd, the University Health Network in Toronto will ask visitors for proof of full vaccination. A negative COVID test will not be accepted in lieu. There are some exceptions. Those visiting some pediatric patients or people at the end of life will not need to show proof of vaccination. Today, Ontario reported its lowest daily case count since the beginning of August, 306 new infections. It is a significant drop from the 458 new cases confirmed on Monday. The last time Ontario logged a daily case count this low was on August the 5th. There is some breaking news tonight about the soldier who was set to lead Canada's army. Lieutenant General Trevor Kadou has become the latest high-ranking officer to face a military police investigation. The Department of National Defence has confirmed the Canadian Forces National Investigation Service is investigating historical allegations against Kadou. Sources tell Global News they are sexual in nature. Kadou's change of command ceremony was postponed last month to allow the investigation to take place. In a statement, Kadou denies the allegations, but says they must be thoroughly investigated. Canada criticized for not acting faster to help Afghan refugees. Coming up, the bureaucratic backlog and the agonizing wait for a man who worked as a Canadian Forces interpreter. Canada plans to welcome 40,000 Afghans, saying there's a moral imperative to do right by the people of that country. And more than 13,000 applications have been filed, according to the Immigration Department. It says staff are working hard to process them, but the wait is agonizing. Crystal Gamansing met with one family now stuck in Ukraine and spoke to a former government employee who says it's taken too long to help those who helped us.
Javed Ahmad Hakmal served as an interpreter for Canadian soldiers on the front lines in Afghanistan. From 2009 to June 2011, he was a part of the Canadian mission to help win the hearts and minds of locals.
I have certificates with me. I have letters with me that there are many Canadians, commanders, high-ranking peoples. They clearly says that this is the person who saved my life. If Javed was not there, I would be not alive here now.
One of Hakmal's platoon commanders from his days as an interpreter calls him a brother in arms.
it's been hell of a ride for him to get out, because he followed all the requirement for Canada process.
Jeremy Vaville set up a GoFundMe page to ease the family's burden. Hakmal filed his family's application to move to Canada under the special immigration program on July 28th, just days after it was unveiled. Immigration, Refugees and Citizenship Canada says it's continuing to process applications for Afghan refugees day and night, adding, "We have mobilized our entire global network to process visas and issue them on an urgent basis." Until they're officially accepted by the Canadian government, they're not eligible for any Canadian supports. But they're not eligible for any Ukrainian services either, because they're not claiming asylum in this country, leaving them to fend for themselves, which means relying on donations from friends and strangers. At the end of August, there were 2 families who were rescued by Ukrainian special forces.
It was really dangerous.
Well, it was the Globe and Mail who got them out of Kabul. It was staff from the office of the Liberal MP for Thunder Bay Rainy River, Marcus Pulowski, who took up an initial collection and flew Javid, his wife, and kids out of Kandahar when the Taliban moved in.
I know for a fact there were people in the minister's office who cared a lot and really wanted to help.
Still, Robert Saint-Aubin says more accountability is needed. He no longer works in the MP's office, but says he started collecting names of Afghans who worked for Canadian soldiers in 2019. He says the government could have acted faster.
I would love for there to be an investigation, maybe a committee report, a study, something to find out what happened. I don't think that's ever going to happen. But it would just be great to know who's responsible and for them to take accountability.
There's not other chance. This is the only chance to save my family.
The Hakmals, in the meantime, are just hoping more months won't pass with them sitting in Ukraine. Crystal Gamansing, Global News, Kyiv.
Still ahead, a raging fire shuts down a major highway in California and forces hundreds to flee. A raging wildfire is threatening homes northwest of Los Angeles. The Alisal wildfire has scorched almost 6,200 hectares in California's Santa Barbara County and is just 5% contained. Hundreds of people have fled their homes. An ExxonMobil facility is being closely monitored and a major highway has been closed. The fire is being fanned by fierce sundowner winds that are common in the area and have stoked some of California's worst fires. Early on Wednesday, Hurricane Pamela hit Mexico's Pacific coast. The resort city of Mazatlan was drenched with heavy rain, causing flash flooding. At the height of the storm, wind gusts hit about 120 kilometers an hour. Pamela is expected to be less intense as it moves inland, moving northeast into the U.S. It's likely to reach the Texas border by Thursday. Heading to the real final frontier next, William Shatner makes space history. This newly released video shows what's believed to be the world's first delivery of donor lungs by an unmanned drone. The pre-dawn flight took off from Toronto Western Hospital and 6 minutes later touched down at Toronto General Hospital. It was a collaboration between the city's University Health Network and a Quebec bioengineering company. Logistics and time are huge factors in organ transplants, and drones could be the future. Well, playing the captain of a starship and actually going to the edge of space are 2 radically different things. Today, Canadian actor William Shatner discovered that firsthand. His trip on the Blue Origin rocket lasted just 11 minutes, but it was enough to move him to tears. Ross Lord reports.
As a promotion for commercial space tourism, you could see this flight coming from light years away. A star passenger whose name is synonymous with outer space, William Shatner.
Space, the final frontier.
Shatner starred in the classic Star Trek TV and movie franchise, confronting villains no matter how dangerous.
I have 5 times your strength. You're a match for me.
But defeating fictional bad guys pales in comparison to this challenge. Flying 106 kilometers high for real at the age of 90, a prospect he'd only entertained previously for fun.
And I think it's gonna be a long, long time. The touchdown brings me round again to 5.
And here comes our crew back into the desert.
Doubters consider these flights a crass display of wealth and power by people like Amazon founder Jeff Bezos, who made this one possible. But for Shatner and 3 other passengers, the effect is beyond overwhelming.
Captain Kirk himself, the great William Shatner.
What you have given me is the most profound experience I can imagine. I'm so filled with emotion about what just happened. The jeopardy, the moment you see how the vulnerability of everything, it's so small. This air, which is keeping us alive, is thinner than your skin.
A man known for an abundant ego during his acting career has been humbled.
I hope that I can maintain what I feel now. I don't want to lose it.
Infinite awe and wonder after this final frontier. Ross Lord, Global News.
From one actor pushing the envelope to another being featured on them, Canada Post is honoring Christopher Plummer with a commemorative stamp. It features images of the Toronto-born actor on stage and in films, from Prospero in The Tempest at the Stratford Festival to Captain George Von Trapp in The Sound of Music back in 1965. Canada Post says it consulted Plummer about creating a stamp before he died, and he was thrilled with the idea. He passed away in February at the age of 91. And that is Global National for this Wednesday. I'm Donna Friesen. Tonight's Your Canada is this field of pumpkins at a farm in Wolfville, Nova Scotia. There are beautiful spots all over Canada. Please email yours to viewers@globalnational.com. Thanks for watching. Hope to see you here again tomorrow. Take care of yourselves. Bye-bye.